Hello, my name is David Fennessy and I'm the composer of the next piece you're going to hear tonight called PPP. I'm still kind of, I feel like I'm floating in some other world after listening to Daniel play that piece so beautifully. So I have to try and come back down to earth again. I thought I would try and tell you a few little things about how this piece of mine came into life. It's from 2004, and it's a kind of important piece for me personally in my own development as a composer, because the piece didn't come about from a commission or something that somebody asked for, but in Glasgow, where I live in Scotland, myself and some colleagues of mine had decided to start a kind of festival where we would put on the music that we wanted to hear, which meant that it was music composed by us. So we decided that there was no limits on the length of the piece or what the instrumentation would be, except that we had to find the ensemble ourselves, use our friends, and every favour that we could find, and stealing things and everything that we could do to put the pieces on. And it posed a very interesting problem for me, which was, if nobody is asking for your music, or if nobody is commissioning it, first of all, the question is, do I really, what do I want to write? The first question is really, do I want to write? Do I want to write music? And the second question is, what is the kind of music I really want to write? And in a way, after some student pieces and after I'd left college and studying composition, this was an important time for me to really ask myself that question, what kind of music do I really want to write? And what does it mean to be a composer and so forth? So, one nice connection about my piece to the Morton Feldman piece is that the piano is really the central thing in my piece also. And it's very much to do with my own personal relationship with pianos. I remember my grandmother had an upright piano in her house, and it was terribly out of tune, very badly out of tune. And I remember as kids, you know, we used to sit up on the stool and you try and find where the nice notes are, you know, to make chords. And it's a strange thing, I don't mean it to insult Morton Feldman, but it made me think a little bit while I was listening to that piece. And I think there's something very similar about the way that Feldman composed for the piano, which was just finding chords that gave him pleasure, not in an intellectual way, but just what really sits. And you can almost hear him composing in the piece. You can hear he plays a chord, and then he plays it again, and then he kind of turns it upside down, and you can hear a mind working. But also how he goes inside the sound. And that was really where I started to think about what I could do with the piano. And this idea about finding the nice sounding chords, I started to think about how the piano is tuned. And if you have on the piano, on the upper strings, I'm sure you know that you have 3 little strings for every note because of the tuning system that we use in the West. And I was kind of fascinated by piano tuners and watching piano tuners, when there's something very romantic to me about piano tuners. And where I live, there was a blind piano tuner who used to come and tune the pianos, and that often happens. But there's something very so focused about the way that they listen to how the sound comes from the piano, and really intuitively figuring out how all the notes relate to each other. And I started to think to use that as my starting point for the piece. So the piece is scored for a piano, electric guitar, that's me playing, cello, 3 bass clarinets, and accordion in this case, although it was originally, when I composed it, it was written for harmonium, so a keyboard instrument that you're pumping air through with your feet. But I'll come back to that in a moment. For me, going inside the sound of this single note on the piano, I started to think, I would somehow like to write a whole piece, a very long piece, where the whole form of the piece was somehow took the amount of time, it would take the same amount of time that it was for a whole piano to be tuned. But then after a while I realised that might be quite boring to listen to a piano being tuned and then say it was a piece of mine, so it developed from then. But I started to get a strange sense of scale, and it often happens to me. So I'm thinking about the image of listening to a note and finding chords on the piano. Somehow for me, when I start to compose and listen to how the chords are moving, I start to focus and focus and focus until everything gets kind of, the scale is all wrong. So suddenly I'm standing on a piano string and a hammer is coming down, hitting the string like this. And that's how I started to think actually of the very long movement that starts this piece with the ensemble. I recorded lots of notes on the piano being played, and then I slowed them all down so they go very, very slow. And what you hear normally, if you just hear a piano note, it goes bing. When you slow it down, you start to hear all of the imperfections in that note and how complex it is. It's a very simple thing. You have attack and decay, sound, the resonance inside the piano. And really the first half of the piece is completely concerned with that. I really, really slowed down this one act, hitting a note and allowing it to resonate. And I started to think all of the different things that happen inside a resonance. There's actually lots of little mysterious sounds that are happening, and somehow that gets transferred into the ensemble. When I was looking to record actual sounds like this, for pre-recorded sounds that I would use with the piece, along with the live ensemble, and then some pre-recorded sounds, I went to a piano tuner that I found in the telephone book, because we were using telephone books still in 2004. And I spent some time with him and I recorded him, but he was a very eccentric guy and he kept talking all the time when I was tuning the piano. And actually he was a very, very funny guy, a very typical Scottish funny guy. So part of the recording of him actually talking and explaining about his relationship with pianos and how it's tuned, that also makes its way into the piece. And as I was composing the piece over a period of about a year, lots of different influences like that came in. I used to go for long walks in the neighbourhood where I lived, and I found a piano on the street, which I also recorded myself playing on it and trying different things. And there's a recording that starts the piece, which is before the ensemble start, which I made at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went out with a recorder and I improvised on the piano in the middle of the night. And that also forms part of this whole consideration of the sound of the piano and where it fit in my own personal relationship to it. Towards the end of the piece, there's also some pre-recorded material that I found from a very old recording from the 1950s, I think, of it's a record for kids called Sparky and His Magic Piano, about a kid who plays a piano and it comes to life. And we used to get played this, and my dad used to play it on a tape in our car when we were travelling. And it always had a massive effect on me. And the last part of the piece is a kind of homage to that nostalgic kind of relationship to the sound of the piano. And for me, because I'm not a piano player, that's the thing for me. I'm a guitarist and I come from playing the guitar as a background. That my relationship with the piano is always a kind of mysterious one. I'm always fascinated by it as a massive kind of machine for making noise, and it makes such a beautiful sound, but I'm not very good at playing it. So for me, part of this piece is to really go inside this piece. I should just, inside the sound of the piano, I should tell you, just to finish before I talk all night, that the piece is quite long and it's in 7 sections. So the very first section is pre-recorded, one of these improvisations I made in the middle of the night on a piano on the street. The second is quite a long movement where I freeze this moment of hitting a note and really go inside the sound of the piano. So everything becomes magnified. The strings are huge, the hammers are huge, everything is kind of magnified. The third movement is another episode for the pre-recorded tape, which is a little bit of the piano tuner talking. The fourth and the fifth movements are based around the electric guitar, which is tuned also very close. The strings are a little bit out of tune with each other. And this tuning is explored in the fourth and fifth movement. The sixth is another improvisation. And the last movement is another long movement, which introduces this character of Sparky, whose voice you should hear quite clearly, I think. And we get into a kind of slightly melancholy world, I think, towards the end of the piece. I hope that gives you some feeling for what I was trying to achieve with the piece. I just want to say that it's been really amazing for me to come back to Novi Sad. Again, I was here about less than 2 years ago doing some workshops with amazing composers here, and I had a terrific time, so I was really to work with great musicians and to be asked to come back and work with these guys has been just a lot of fun, and I think it's great what they do with the series and the things that they're trying to do with new music in Novi Sad, so I'm very happy to be here and I hope you enjoy the piece. So I'd like to invite now the rest of the ensemble, so I'm not alone on the stage, and yeah, let's play PPP.